Welcome to Prepare to Survive, Pinellas County's E-Series presentation on disaster preparedness. I'm your host, Tom Iavina with the Pinellas County Communications Department. For the next 15 minutes, we'll take a look at hurricane preparedness outdoors as we take a look at how to prepare our yards for potential tropical trouble. If you're participating online at www.pinellascounty.org/eSeries, feel free to blog your questions. Those meeting our terms of participation will be posted, and if we don't get to your question, please leave your email so we can respond. Joining us today to help our outdoor spaces get ready for storm season is Dale Armstrong, the Pinellas County Coordinator of the University of Florida Extension Florida-Friendly Landscape Program. Thanks for joining us, Dale. That sure was a mouthful.
It is, Tom. Thank you.
Dale, outdoor spaces in Florida, everybody loves to be outside because it's beautiful, and part of the beauty are trees and our outdoor environment. But when it comes to hurricanes, they're very vulnerable, aren't they? And I understand that there's been some research done on this.
Yeah, so after actually starting 20 years ago, after Hurricane Andrew came through in southeast Florida, the University of Florida started research, and they had a banner year in 2004, 2005, both years. And the results of that research was published with recommendations from their observations that they made.
Yeah, we've got to fit the actual image of the website here with the findings on it. What are some of the things they found about trees in Florida, their survivability?
Well, the interesting thing is it's very dependent upon the tree species, whether it's native or non-native, the age of the tree, the health of the tree, and also the structure of the tree. Mm-hmm. And interestingly enough, it's not just the wind speed by itself, but there are other factors involved, like how fast is the hurricane moving through the area, how long is it in the area, mm-hmm. and how much precipitation, because the more precipitation there is, it loosens up the soil profile and makes a tree more likely to blow over.
And it's incredible to see the size of the trees that these storms can blow over. I mean, you're just talking gigantic trees that have been around for a long time.
It's very surprising, especially 20 years ago, and with Andrew, with the narrow soil profile they have there, mm-hmm. and a combination of those very intense winds of 160, 170. We lost about 40% of the urban forest there in southeast Florida during that hurricane. And by comparison, when Charlie came through in 2004, it was a very compact, fast-moving storm with very little precipitation, and the tree canopy loss there in the urban forest was much less, more like about 18%. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of factors other than just the wind speed, even though Charlie was a very powerful hurricane as well. Maybe that was a Category 4.
Yeah, it was actually Category 5 when we think about it. Well, Charlie was the 4 and Andrew was the 5, but still, yeah. I mean, two very large storms, two very powerful storms. One of the bits of wisdom we hear all the time from people are that you should go with natives. And of course, native plants have evolved here in Florida with the hurricanes.
Right.
And they always fare better when it comes to hurricanes. But that's not always the case, right?
Again, species dependent. So there are many natives, like live oak is one that comes to mind, the bald cypress and pond cypress, southern magnolia. But there are others on the opposite end of the spectrum, like the one in the photo that's on the screen now.
We have a photo right here now, this cherry laurel.
Cherry laurel, and I took that one in St. Petersburg, and that was actually just snapped off, broken. That's one of the measures of failure, is a tree either uproots or it breaks, mm-hmm. or it's leaning at an angle of less than 45 degrees. That's considered a goner.
Okay.
And we have sand pines. Our native sand pines is a good example of one that will be blown over and uprooted in storms. They're not able to hold themselves up. Another native, two natives really that come to mind are the slash pine and the longleaf pine. Mm-hmm. And those are surprisingly also vulnerable to high winds.
And when you think about it, I mean, we're talking, especially with this photo of this cherry laurel we've seen. What year was that taken, the image? Was it taken after the 04 season?
This was 04, 05. I don't recall which one it was.
Okay, but we're talking about storms that never reached hurricane intensity.
Exactly, yes.
And this kind of damage happened below 74 miles.
Yeah, we didn't really have a direct hit in this particular storm, and we had some damage, but that was surprising to me, the photo that I took there.
It's impressive. Now let me ask you this. We've got our tree canopy, our urban canopy, and it has been since 1921, since we've seen the landfall of a hurricane here in Pinellas County. It's 91 years. Trees get big in 91 years, don't they?
They do.
What kind of damage could we be looking at these older trees?
Well, one of the issues that they discovered during the research was that trees that were near the end of their life, first of all, they tend to get more brittle, less able to, you know, kind of like us, and less able to move around easily. And so they were more likely to snap. Also, as trees reach the end of the life cycle, and this is like this with many plants, not just trees, but they start to decline. They may be more subject to insect and disease issues, rotted areas, and those are points of vulnerability that really the homeowner needs to be on the lookout for when they're preparing. Okay, if we're going into hurricane season, I need to take a look at my trees and see if I need to call in a certified arborist to help me take care of some of the issues I may have with trees that need attention.
Oh, now that's a key, a certified arborist, somebody who knows what they're doing when they're actually trimming the tree back.
Yes, and you know, trimming in a large tree can be very dangerous, and you know, I don't encourage people necessarily to take that task on themselves, especially if they don't know what they're doing as far as the structure of the tree goes. They may do more harm than good.
Yeah, they can harm themselves and the tree,
And
so it could be a combination of both. Actually, we've got a question here that came in from Ann. Dale, we planted a tree called a gumbo limbo tourist tree. They said it's good for storms, but the branches break so easily. Will I even have a tree left after the storm? And there's a specific species of tree that we see sometimes here in Florida.
Yeah, that's a native tree that we typically would see more in South Florida, maybe from Braden or Sarasota south. But of course, barring a hard freeze in our area, that tree will probably do pretty well. But it is kind of like in the moderate or medium range for survivability in a hurricane. It can have brittle wood, but it's fairly good comparing to some of the other trees that we might look at. And maybe it's a good thing to mention that there are a number of trees on the low end that I want to mention because people have those, just like a big tall gumbo limbo. And it would be things like, well, starting with some of our invasive species like Australian pine. They get very tall. Melaleuca, which is that white papery bark tree.
Oh, sure. Yeah, the punk trees that people talk about.
And then we have camphor and Chinese tallow are two other trees that we're not recommending these days, or either they're a prohibited species. But those are all very brittle, and they'll either break very easily or they'll go over in a storm. So if I had a tall one of those sitting next to my house, I'd be very concerned. If I had a hurricane approaching that was Category 3 or higher.
Obviously, you could see some damage in the house. Now, when we're talking about getting these trees trimmed back, and obviously that's an important step. There are some things that you obviously want your certified arborist to look at. One of those things that you point out is just something like a bark inclusion. Now, I've heard about this, but I'm not sure exactly what it means. Can you talk? We have an image here on the screen, by the way, of a bark inclusion. What is this exactly?
Well, what it is two codominant trunks or branches, two or more actually, that don't have good attachment, and it's when you have that deep V. Okay, you can actually see the line going down between the trunks, and sometimes you may even see some oozing going on there between the two, and there really isn't a good union there. And what happens in high winds is one side or the other of the tree will typically split off, and it just peels right down, and you lose half the tree or a third of the tree, depending on how many of those there are. So the idea, like if you looked at the example of the younger tree on the screen, is that probably the right trunk should be subordinated to the larger one, meaning reducing the length of that so that we'll have one central leader, and that's what we're looking for in our trees, as a central leader, so it can be the strong point of the tree. So any place you have a union like that with a included bark, then it's not a good attachment point.
Okay.
So it needs some attention. And
you want some attention. Again, the whole idea is to get the tree primarily have one solid, strong trunk up the middle, and then the branches coming off from there.
And the younger the tree is, the better to start the pruning so that you get the tree right to begin with, rather than try and go back and do pruning on an older tree, which isn't going to be as responsive to healing itself over, and then you may have some issues with rot later.
Sure, definitely. And now when we talk about getting trees pruned and you're out there doing your work, having that done, you don't want to wait until the storm's right down, 24 hours out, right? You want to make sure this is done well in advance.
This would be the time to be looking at your trees, looking to see if there are any obviously dead or dying branches that need attention, some rotted areas. Sometimes rotted areas aren't really obvious, but if you hire a professional who knows what they're looking for, they might even look at some of the issues with what directions the branches are going versus the root space that's available for a tree, and do some evaluation as to what direction the tree might be likely to go. Of course, that depends on wind direction as well, but many factors that can probably best be ascertained by a certified arborist.
Okay, and we've got a question coming in from Ted. Ted asks, what would be a best tree to plant? You want shade, but a tree that doesn't shed its leaves and it's hurricane tolerant. What might be one that you would recommend?
And doesn't shed its leaves.
Well, it doesn't shed its leaves as much. Obviously,
yeah,
some are going to fall.
And we all want the perfect tree. You know, one of the trees that I like that I think we underutilize maybe is the southern magnolia.
Oh, really?
And it does get very large with age, and it doesn't have a lot of problems with debris. Yeah, it will lose some leaves now and then, but there is also a smaller variety, a cultivar called Little Jim, and that's not J-I-M, but G-E-M.
Okay.
Very compact, lovely tree. You know, the other ones that we know are very stable trees on the large size, you know, they may have what people consider disadvantages, like the shedding of the oak leaves.
Oh, sure.
Me, I use those in my compost and in my plant bed, so I look forward to those every year so I can collect them up.
Oh, so that's a benefit. You get the added benefit.
To me, it is,
okay,
yeah.
if you're going to be organic gardener, you want to do that.
And there are a number of other trees that you might look for that they could go to our website for.
Okay.
To find that type of information. And in fact, you have.
As a matter of fact, we have the website up here, and the website is for Pinellas County Extension Services.
For the Extension Service itself is PinellasCountyExtension.org.
Okay.
That would be for everything that we have available in all the different program areas that we have, because we're not just about horticulture.
Oh, sure.
We have other things as well that are available for public education. But the AskExtension.org is a website that has a database of many of the more common questions that we get asked on a daily basis, and you can also ask a specific question if it's not in that particular list of questions on the topic that you key in.
Okay. Now, let's get out of the trees for a minute, talk about some of the other things, practical outdoor things. Yard furniture, bird baths, things like that. What should people be doing with them before a storm?
They need to go somewhere. In the garage, in the house, in a shed. Of course, some sheds may be likely to disappear in a storm as well. But anything that's loose outside needs to be put away somewhere.
Okay.
So patio furniture, toys, hanging baskets, maybe something that's probably going to be obvious, but maybe not. Any potted plants that you know, maybe picked up by the wind. Bird baths.
Oh, yeah, they get going. And barbecue grills, things along those lines.
All those things that are probably obvious.
And just so you know, from what I've read, the advice of throwing them into your pool, actually not preferred, because it does damage to the lining of the pool. So if you throw all the furniture into the pool, you may need an even bigger repair bill after the fact trying to repair the liner.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I always thought about the corrosion issue.
Yeah, there could be, yeah.
From perhaps the chlorine or whatever materials are used for in the pool.
Okay. Now, Dale, we've got just about a minute left. What would you like to tell homeowners in Pinellas County, you know, as they get ready for hurricane season? What do you want to emphasize to them?
Well, mostly what we've just discussed, Tom, I think, is that do a self-evaluation of your landscape, but taking a walk around. Look at your trees carefully. If you have any doubt about, oh, if that tree goes over, is it likely to go over on my house? Do I have some issues where there's narrow root space? And that's something we didn't really have time to talk a lot about. But root space for a tree is very important. A large tree needs at least a 30 by 30 foot area for an adequate root system.
And that's a substantial amount of land.
Yes, it is. It's
Definitely.
surprising to people. Groups of trees do real well, but still they need to be spaced out. But they're better wind resistant when they're grouped.
Dale, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank
Some
you,
really good information to start off with. Just so you know, the University of Florida-IFAS Extension has a great website on the topic of trees and hurricanes. You can find it at hort.ifas.ufl.edu/trees and hurricanes. That was a mouthful. As always, our local Pinellas County Extension office is available to help you. You can send your questions to www.askextension.org or call 727-582-2100. And visit the Extension website for lots of useful information on a variety of topics at www.pinellascountyextension.org. Now, if you'd like to see a repeat of this presentation or read the questions, please visit www.pinellascounty.org/eSeries. If you'd like more information on how to prepare for hurricanes or other potential disasters, visit the Pinellas County Emergency Management homepage at www.pinellascounty.org/emergency. Please join us again at noon on Wednesday, June 6th for the next edition of Prepare to Survive eSeries. Stay safe.